Manchester United 2, Crystal Palace 1. Another 3 points, Phil, and Manchester United climbed to third. 6 wins in 7 outings from Michael Carrick's Reds. It remains a good time to be a Red, sir.
You know, before the game, Shaun, I was hoping United would have a convincing result. I hope United was going to have a convincing performance. You looked at United's next number of fixtures. You were looking at the Palace game, going, "All right, this is one where maybe I have the highest expectation." And it's a long time since we've gone into football games with an expectation that not that it could go any way, other way than a win, but how much are we going to win? Then your perspective shifts at halftime. You're going, okay, that's not what I was expecting. I know we've had somewhat of a performance drop off in some of the other games, which to me you should expect. And like, okay, it's now starting to pick up a couple of injuries, which are starting to have an impact. We're hoping to have Leach Martinez back today. We didn't see him today. Of course, Luke Shaw now injured. And I missed most of the first half. I was sitting at halftime going through this and going, anyone right now snatch their hand off for it. All they had to do in that second half was make sure when the final whistle went, they had more goals than the opposition, regardless of what that was, and that's what they did.
Yeah, absolutely. And we discussed the last day after Everton how you can look at games, you can look at performances, you can diagnose what you want, and ultimately at the end, you just want 3 points. It's fantastic to get that result. It's 11 games unbeaten. I saw a statistic. The club actually put it out immediately after the game. Michael Carrick has now got the joint best record of any manager or head coach in Premier League history after his first 9 games at the club, which is a testament to just how positive an impact he's had on the football team. There's a lot of good things to speak about. I know you said you missed a lot of the first half. There is an awful lot of good things to speak about, but I rather end on that rather than end on any sort of a negative. And
Mm-hmm.
it has to be said, this was a strange start. It was a very lethargic start. You had, I'd like to say the opening quarter, but it was really the opening half an hour where it almost looked like Manchester United were the side that were playing on Thursday, not Crystal Palace.
Mm.
Everything was done in either first or second gear. It was pedestrian. It was lacking any form of tempo. And it was such a shame because Old Trafford was absolutely lifted out of it. This was a day that obviously I wasn't there, but I got to watch it on the television. You get to see the different perspective for once. And it really was rocking. There was that sense of euphoria around the place. Like you said, how much are we going to win by today? How much can we capitalize on a side that are tired? But they came out slow. They came out very rusty. And it
Yeah.
wasn't a surprise that Crystal Palace scored, even though it was only after 4 minutes. I know it shocked a lot of people, but Lenny Yoro was beaten. He was flat footed, and we got done by a set piece for once. It wasn't us actually doing the set piece. And it was difficult to look at because you're trying to put two and two together and actually figure out what is after happening here. Why are we starting so slow? And this is something that I want to run by you because we discussed this the last day. We said, Phil, we've gone and we haven't lost under Michael Carrick yet, but we've had back-to-back games against West Ham and Everton where the performance was not necessarily great. And then we start this one, the opening half an hour, in the same way. It is slightly concerning.
What is a bit concerning to me, or maybe it should be expected, is there are some little habits starting to creep back in that I saw under Emery, and you start to notice patterns. Take a look at how many times under Emery where United would come out for the second half in that period between 45 and 55 minutes, 50 odd minutes. How many times they would concede? I think it was against Bournemouth. They went in 2-1 up. Within 50 minutes, they're 3-2 down. Right? And you would see this a lot. You're looking at those first 5 minute periods of games when you're coming out prepared. That suggests to me that there's a focus issue there. That sort of a lackadaisical lethargy coming into games where we'll grow into it and you're not 100% right. Sometimes when you're winning games like United have been doing, you inevitably get a bit of complacency. I'm sure United players, just like everyone else, are human, looked at that Crystal Palace game and thought, all right, maybe we don't need to go with the same intensity that we went with at Arsenal or City. It's just natural, normal, that happens. And in United's slight defence, Shaun, lots of teams are dropping points in the Premier League. lots of people, every team's doing these types of things in games where they're not dominating the game for 90 minutes, they're conceding goals. There's no way, I know statistically, I think they are, but or they're thereabouts, but there's no way to me that Wolves team's the worst team that's ever been in the Premier League, right? So if you take the worst team in the Premier League this season, they took points off United at Old Trafford. Dorothy, of course, almost got the winner, was ruled out. They've taken points off Arsenal. You know, City have gone to Spurs 2-0 up, a team that looks all the world for getting relegated, through a 2-0 lead away. So these things can happen. But once you need to go 1-0 behind, now they're being asked other questions. They've gone 1-0 behind before, under Carrick, they went 1-0 behind at Arsenal, and they responded the right way.
Yeah, absolutely. And I'm not going totally downing on this because something that so many of the cross sections of the media will discuss is to how advantageous it is for Manchester United to not be playing as much as other teams. But there is a downside to that, Phil, because when you are only playing once a week, you have your training ground routines, you have the time spent at Carrington, but then getting yourself up for competitive competition is a little bit more difficult. And that does stand to reason as well. And the main thing to take from it, obviously the side fell behind, but once more showed that resilience, showed that battling mentality to get back into the game. And it was even better as well. It didn't have to come at half time and a dressing down from Michael Carrick, because from
Yeah,
about 30 minutes onward, United upped it a gear. I'm not going to say that they were flying on all cylinders, but they were creating opportunities. Harry Maguire came close. Well, it was kind of a scuffed effort from a set piece that Harry Maguire headed in. But then you look like Benjamin Sesko had an opportunity where he brought a half decent save out of Dean Henderson before Bruno Fernandes really bought the breast out of him with a set piece with maybe about 5 minutes of the first half remaining. And we started to see glimpses, shades of what the team is actually capable of. I wrote in my full-time report that you didn't need to be a fly in the wall to gain any sort of understanding as to what Carrick was going to say to his team, because ultimately it wasn't a good enough standard. We have expectations as Manchester United at the best of times, even at the worst of times, we have expectations about this team. And at the restart, he remained loyal to his starting 11, let them back out, and then they rewarded him. There's something to be said about that, Phil, because there's a common understanding between manager and players, isn't there?
I think you bring up a good point in that one of the things that Michael Carrick has been quite vocal about is letting players come up with their own solutions without
Mm.
managing every minor detail. Okay, 1-0 down, what are you going to do about it? Because if we're relying on players getting a bollocking at halftime to know, experienced footballers to know what they knew 45 minutes ago, shouldn't need a bollocking at halftime to fix a result. If that's what it takes for you to do what you need to do in a game of football, we're in big trouble. Now, if you get a reaction 4 or 5 times a season as a result of that, fine. But if you're having, and this is like where I would hate after games, the God, thank God, well, I'm not this in the world. The social media statements, we need to be better, we need to take a good look at ourselves, or Jojo Dallo would say things like, we need to be more obsessed with playing for Man United. Christ, it would drive me mad. And then the next game, they look like they were doing community service, right?
Yeah.
And you're going, this, I don't want to hear this. I want you to say this to yourself before you take the field, not after. And you see all the, oh, Ruben Amorim's going to get them in and give them a bollocking. Why? What's he going to tell them? He didn't tell them last week. What do they need to know that he's going to cover in this bollocking? It's going to produce. Why can't this be a natural? You should have a natural consequential reaction to going behind or fixing games as a result of how you're driven personally, internally, intrinsically. If you need a manager to do that for you, you're not going to last in professional sport. So Michael Carrick has said to the players, you fix this problem. And again, Big Sesko's come up Trump's for him. He started him today. He rewarded Carrick once again for putting trust in him, scoring key consequential goals. And look, United just had to win that game. If they didn't, Shaun, the rest of these fixtures are much more difficult because now there's more pressure to take stuff from them. They won the game. They've done what they were supposed to do. They're coming up with solutions in games that don't require substitutions, that don't require massive uh, uh, impact from the bench. Where the Michael Carrick's come up with solutions, and I thought the club was a bit unlucky to be sent off, to be honest. But United done what they had to do. And one other thing, United's job today was to beat Crystal Palace. It wasn't to perform at a level that gives you confidence going into Wednesday. Wednesday's a different game. They'll play different against a different opposition. The job today was to win this game, and they did.
I'm glad you said about Wednesday because I was going to veer into that after what I had just said to you about the pitfalls of not playing so much. Well, now you have an opportunity to play 3 days after. So there should be no lethargic attitude inside in that dressing room. And you know what? I launched the Theatre of Red maybe what, a year and a half ago. So I have composed many, many articles in the shadow of defeat, Phil. It's been quite painful. It's been very difficult trying to muster up the strength to be anyway motivated to write these articles on a weekly basis. But one thing that I routinely said is if you have a player at that team in that dressing room that needs any motivation to get out there and play football for Manchester United, they should not be there. And one man, I don't care, come rain, hail, or storm, who needs absolutely no inspiration or motivation to do it is Bruno Fernandes.
Mm.
I have been fighting his corner for as long as I can remember. I just until the day that I stop looking at football, I will never understand how people do not rate him as one of the finest players in the Premier League. Another goal and an assist today, Phil. And that's not including at least three crosses that he put on the head of Casemiro and Sesko that could have very easily found their way into the back of the net. 25 Premier League appearances this season, 7 goals, 13 assists. 20 goal contributions in 25 appearances for a 31-year-old who looks like when the final whistle goes, he could run for another 90 minutes. I mean, I don't think I could say anything more about just how graceful he is, but just how inspirational and vital is he to this team.
I think human brain habituates everything. And when you get someone that is so consistent, you take it for granted. Then you get discussions around Bruno Fernandes where we used to have public shame and embarrassment for being that wrong, which we don't have anymore. Anyone been questioning Bruno Fernandes' quality. Sometimes I wonder if I inhabit a different world than the other people I'm speaking to online
Yeah,
because
I
yeah,
know.
I know you have taken a lot of shrooms and stuff in my time, so it's possible some residual effects, but I'm watching something. Surely you have to be watching the same thing. You take a look at Bruno Fernandes. Bruno Fernandes, by all accounts, could have left United a couple of years ago and went to Real Madrid or anywhere he wanted, and we'd have a collection of trophies. And you look at all the other signings United were making before that. I mean, I trust Bruno Fernandes with my life. 99% of the other signings, I trust them as much as about a glossy apple juice or Kelly's. Right? I'm sorry, like to me, that's I'm not. I have no confidence there, right, in the product. I'm don't understand how anyone's questioning him. To tell you the truth, what a fantastic player.
You know, so many people, they make the argument about his age. And there is something that you can look at that when you're talking about a guy who's in his 30s and you're being offered obscene money for him. But then
Hmm.
the question that you always have to ask in response, who do you replace him with? You look at last season and you look at how, let me get an example. Let's say Florian Wirtz
Mm.
looked
Yeah.
absolutely sensational in the Bundesliga. He looked like the second coming. And if you go off and you get 100 million for Bruno Fernandes and then you drop it on Florian Wirtz, it's already evident that it's not as easy to just come in and impact a game in the Premier League as so many people think it is. I genuinely think that Bruno Fernandes is irreplaceable. And given the way that he takes care of himself, Phil, the way he takes care of himself, he's almost got that Ryan Giggs mentality with the yoga and with the conditioning of his body. I see no world where he couldn't continue to play at this level for at least another 3 seasons.
This is a really important discussion in Bruno Fernandes being replaceable. When United had Cantona, and they didn't replace him like for like. They had to change how the team played because you just couldn't go out and find another one. Now, admittedly, I think Cantona retired in '87. Within 2 years, United won the Champions League. Adjusting to not having him, when United are going to replace Bruno Fernandes, to me, you're not going to replace him with like for like player. You're going to have to replace him within a system of how a team plays because you're just not going to be able to go out and find another Bruno Fernandes. And when you look at the young players that are emerging, Shaun, them, the Shea Lacey's, JJ Gabriel's and stuff, United will get that, to me, that output from other players in other positions that they're getting from Fernandes. It's just not going to be like for me.
Yeah, I mean, it's a good point because obviously at that period you're talking about, what are we talking about? David Beckham,
Uh,
Nicky Butt, Paul Scholes, and the Neville brothers. You got five players coming in, impacting in all different ways, and we saw it again today. A man we spoke about the last day against Everton, Jack Morehouse, made the bench again, and we saw obviously Tyler Fletcher make the bench again. So I know neither of them obviously got to get any minutes, and that was down to the nature of the game. It was fine margins near the end of it, and Aiden Heaven obviously got some time. But I know there's credence in what you're saying, and I know you can't just go out and replace like for like. It's just not that easy. But I still just can't help but feel that it's not only just from this contingent of social pariahs that are apparently Manchester United supporters that wish to down Bruno, but it's the constant just diminishing of anything that he does and the quality that he has from opposition supporters. And I know a lot of it comes from envy, but let me ask you a question. I suppose this is a simple question. Is there one team that he wouldn't walk into right now in world football?
no, this is the football has become so one-dimensionally boring. We talked about this a week or two ago. I don't think it's Guardiola effect. I think what we're seeing in society is just this homogeneity of almost this systematic manufacturing of footballers or employees with just utility or a certain skill set that is repeatable, but there is no allowance for individual creativity, brilliance that is, you get to the Premier League and they try to cut all that out to make you an efficient footballer. Same in Spain, same everywhere else. So you take a look at the Ballon d'Or list. Where are these players coming from? This is why Pep Guardiola is having a very hard time trying to replicate his success. The era when he came into City, it was didn't need scouts. The identifiable individual talent that was levels above everyone else was obvious. It was there. You could go out and buy it. If I give you £100 million for a striker, who are you signing? Who's out there? You
Benjamin
know,
Sesko.
you look at Holland, right? Now, Shaun, you take a look at Holland, right? Take a look at the strikers in the 90s. The Batistutas, Romarios, Ronaldo. Holland is a decent striker at that bracket, but he's not in the top. I mean, he's not a Batistuta. Now he's, to me, arguably easily the best number 9 in the world. Because there's just no other number 9s out there. Now we're seeing a young lad like Sesko that's had a fantastic run of form, but he's still very young and he's still, a lot very unproven. But trying to replace individual talent in this modern era, Jesus, that's hard.
This is something that I wrote about in extensive detail. I'm going to say 4 or 5 years ago. I wrote it for World Football magazine, and it was about the dying art of the number 9 in football. And most of the heavy focus on it was the evolution of tactics and how inside forwards started revolutionizing the way teams attacked. You saw an awful lot of it with Klopp when he
Mhm.
had that. He had Firmino almost playing that very very dropped 9, and then you saw the output of Mohamed Salah and Sadio Mane, and that inspired a new brand of football and a new brand of footballer. And you see it from kiddies because you're involved in that yourself. You see so many of the young lads now, and they come into their early teens and they idolize a different type of footballer than what myself and yourself did when we were growing up. You mentioned Batistuta, one of the most fantastic footballers. You got the likes of Hernan Crespo back in the day. these were and like and the player that so many people just choose to leave out of the conversation in the original Ronaldo. You know, these were the players that we idolized when we were growing up. And that I think has fallen by the wayside as a byproduct of footballing evolution, Phil.
These players are nascent of a system that allows for street football, that allows for players to go learn away from a critiqued environment. You'll see this all the time. I hate this. You'll see clips on Twitter every once in a while of, say, a U10 team putting together 30 passes and then putting the ball in the net. I'm like, this is the biggest bunch of shit you'll ever see in your life.
Yeah, I
These,
know.
these, these kids are going, these teams break up after a year or two. Now what? Because the players that are involved in this, how well this team plays will have nothing to do with your child's individual development, right? And the players that are involved in this is all about ego for a coach. Your job is not to get your U10 team or U11 team, right, playing like 1970 Brazil. Your job is to make each of those kids individually better so that they can go on. If I've got a kid in P1 or first grade, as they say here, and 3 years later I still have that kid, who's that for? Well, he might be asking all the questions because I've kept him at the same level and not progressed him, right? But in a couple of years, when they're too old for this, now what? So you see this, professional football is completely contaminated youth football. We see things at U10, U11, kids being left on a bench, being brought on the fight. Hey, Johnny, come on. You see, if that's my kid, I'm going up to a coach and going, let me fucking tell you something. Let me tell you what my kid's rate is for him to sit in your bench. Because when you're comparing him to players that are sitting on Pep Guardiola's bench, they're on £500,000 a week, right? And but you see, the parents contaminate it too. We hear things like, participation trophies destroy kids. First of all, participation trophies, who brought those in? It wasn't the kids, it's the parents, right? And kids place as much value on a participation trophy as they do on a fucking toy and a Happy Meal. They know the difference between what they want and what was given to them. This is about parents, not about kids. Who puts kids in endless competition? Parents. I don't even think kids should be playing in competition for maybe the first 2-3 years. That first 2-3 years should be about developing a technical skill set, which you can't develop in a game because they don't touch the ball enough, right? Plus, they're trying to execute skill set that has a consequence if you don't execute properly, where a team scores a goal, and mom, dad, brother, sister, aunt, and uncle's all bollocking a kid in the side. How does a kid develop in that? It is so, leave these kids alone. Let them play outside of competition. Let them play futsal. Go pick them up after football. Don't stand there and scream and shout at a kid. The whole system is about the ego of parents and coaches and kids. Unfortunately, are the recipient and the victim of this shit. Right? Massive ego contamination in youth football because coaches want to win, parents want to win. If your kid is playing nothing but games, your kid's not developing. Your kid needs to be taking a ball against the wall by themselves, not going to getting comfortable with ball mastery. Imagine starting out learning how to play a trumpet and being thrown in an orchestra the first week. Fuck you, no, let this kid learn how to read music. Let this kid learn how to play. Then we put him in an orchestra. It's just completely wrong.
I understand everything you're saying. I went through many years ago now. You're going over 20 years ago. I went through 3 stages of the FAI's coaching scheme here, and I looked after so many young teams, including my sons. And as I said to you on a previous episode, it was just all about ensuring that they enjoyed themselves and that they were happy to come back the following year.
Oh,
But I,
most
you know, but
important.
I've had the joy and the privilege in Portugal and in Spain to see underage academies in Portugal because the system is totally different. It works in regions, and the regions develop players that go into, if they're lucky, to play in the national leagues. But I also saw it in Spain, and I saw it with Barcelona. And there's, I don't know, is it correct? But they're looking at a situation of encouraging competitiveness in such a young age. that they will look to see who can sink and who can swim.
I don't
And
believe
that's when you get the byproduct of like Lamine Yamal coming through at such a young age, because they have set this policy and in tow from such a very, very young age that if we get this competitive nature, if we can get out these YouTube montages that you're making reference to, showing the world the next Messi, then we can inspire confidence in younger players to go and replicate this. And I don't agree with that, but
so.
you end up seeing the byproduct with all of these young footballers coming through in 2025,
I think
2026 now.
we should be getting 50 Lamine Yamals, not one. If that system produced that player, he shouldn't be an exception. If that is a result of certain methods, then we should be seeing a lot of them, not one of them. So I hear so much shit. Oh, kids need to learn mental toughness, mental resilience. Can you tell me one skill, one thing that teaches mental resilience? It certainly has nothing to do with the accumulation of negative experiences, or veterans wouldn't be blown their head off 4 or 5 times a day. So now we know that shit. Kid misses a chance, go do laps. Now I want you to imagine Tiger Woods' caddy on the 18th hole of Augusta. If he misses a putt, fuck you, Tiger. You need to do 5 laps of Augusta for missing that. Oh, how great, boss. When does the coach do 5 laps?
I
When
get
does
it.
he have to do 5 laps for making mistakes? Because apparently he's never to blame.
I get it.
Football's
No, it's
theoretical, Shaun.
it's totally flawed. It is very flawed.
Football sport is a heuristic, right? At your skill sets. It's not theoretical. You can teach mathematics theoretically. The kid walks up to a basketball coach, says, hey, how many times do I need to practice before I can do a three throw with a 3 pointer without fail? No one has the answer to that question. Nobody knows. Because I can't teach it to you verbally. I can set certain scenarios that can help you develop faster. But how the human brain works, multi-processing, speed, you can't replicate that in training. You can't replicate. That is nothing to do with the coach, and it's nothing but hubris to think that you taught that kid how to do an overhead kick. You did not. Right? That kid taught themselves. No one's ever taught anyone how to play football verbally in their life. Nobody. So this idea that we need to kids need to be exposed to competitor to learn how to this is bollocks. This is total nonsense. Kids are competitive when they are incentivized to achieve the end goal, not because it's important to you or to me or to not granny or granda or because it's important to them. Kids develop on a football pitch when they have confidence, because when they have confidence, they want the ball. When they don't have confidence, when they don't have a skill set or technique, they don't want the ball. They shake themselves. They don't want the ball because they have no technical base to have the confidence to want the ball in a game. But we want to throw these kids into competition as quick as possible so we can have this big, massive ego boost when our kid scores a hat trick at the weekend, right? Against the kid who's never done goalkeeper in their lives. Irrelevant. I just want to say my kid scored a hat trick, right? I mean, I don't care if you've got Jade Goody in nets. As long as my kid's scoring a hat trick, right? This is bollocks, mate. This when you were a kid, we were kids. Remember when you get asked the question in front of the whole class and you got it wrong? Everybody remembers that. Everybody remembers how you feel when that happened. The embarrassment. Next time a teacher asks the question, it doesn't matter if it's 2 plus 2. You're hiding on the table because you don't want. What do you think a kid feels when everyone's shouting at them on the sideline? And some dickhead is going, Johnny, we're going to play with inverted wingers, overlapping fullbacks, 2 in a double pivot, pulse 9, and playing in a half space. What the fuck are you talking about? These kids can't trap a ball. This is all ego. They shouldn't even be given instructions. I get this
That
every week. My daughter's a striker. Paul, this is like me walking into my P1 teacher and going, my fucking child's a quantum physicist. Your child is not a. Leave them alone. So
why
this
don't
is
why don't why don't you tell us how you really feel?
no, but I think this is so toxic to child's development. And then we get every generation, who's after the next one as being privileged. Well, that's what human development feels like. Okay, my parents got to take showers. My fucking grandfather never did, right? Because that technology wasn't invented. So these kids are dealing with social media, all these variables that we never had to, and the whole system is designed for the purpose and satisfaction of parents. So when we get back to this, we're talking about Batistuta and all. You think Batistuta was the player he was because he was paying a couple of grand a year for coaching? Like, this is madness, Sean.
But this is all the byproduct of the evolution of the game from a financial perspective.
Yes,
It can be shite, Phil, but it's the truth.
yes,
It bring it back to when Sky got involved in England. It's all about money. It's how you can
always,
monetize a product.
always.
And regardless
Commoditize
of
that.
what exactly, and what is right and what is wrong on grassroots football is irrelevant to these people if they can
Of
produce
course.
one superstar. If they can produce one superstar, that's all that matters because that person will sell shirts, that person will put bums on seats, and that person will encourage people who aren't using dodgy boxes to purchase subscriptions to watch these people live.
If Ronaldo and Messi show up at 5, 6 years of age today to play football, it would never be harder for them to make it than what it is right now. This system ruins more careers than it makes. This is why JJ Gabriel and Shea Lacey are so appealing to me because finally we're having players that can develop that have a raw football element to them. So you could take me to art class, right? And you could teach me how to paint by numbers just by following a recursive procedure. But I could never paint the Sistine Chapel out of that, right? That's not taught. You can't teach someone how to do that. If we were to say art class, if we just keep teaching art class and exposing young artists to pressure at 5, 6, we get okay. Well, then if that is the emergent property of your procedures, you should be getting that all the time. If I'm producing one in a million, it's not the system. So I don't believe, I believe you should keep kids out of competition until about 10 years ago. There's going to be people recoiling listening to this, thinking I'm a big fan. But that's again, you see what's happening. It's the parents doing that, it's the coaches doing that. And this is so antithetical to development, but we don't want, most of us don't want to do what is good for the kid's development because there's no emotional dividend for us in that.
It's unfortunate, and I mean, as a parent, I can't stand it. I
Mm.
mean, my boy is grown now. He's after turning 20 in the last couple of days, and he's a
Oh,
man
happy birthday.
himself.
Our boys have the same birthday as me, by the way.
Well, our boys have the same birthday, so many happy returns. But he's been there, he's done it, and I've tried to do everything I could possibly do throughout his journey to keep him interested in football, for one, but to set realistic expectations from the outset that the success rate of footballers is so small. But if you can learn to become a good man, and if you can learn principles of team building and how important it is to be there for friends and for teammates, then it'll benefit you as you get on in life. And that's the fundamental aim here.
Man, we see the biggest reason why kids don't make it. And I'm not just talking about football, I'm talking about whatever vocation you want. It has nothing to do with ability. It's to do with math.
Hmm.
When kids are growing up, they're going through segregation. U9s play against U9, 10s, 10s, 12, 11. And as they get better and better, they go up through the pyramid. When they're at the bottom, they're the best player on the pitch. Then they go up another level, they're the best player. Until they get to a level where now they're playing against players where they're not being segregated anymore by age, and they're playing against players where every player on the pitch is exceptional. Now, what happens next is what's in here. If that kid grew up in poverty, he's had sexual abuse, physical abuse, verbal abuse, a lack of love, a lack of all this stuff's going to affect because they're going to have imposter syndrome. And this is going to impact them in every challenge they have. These kids have a real difficulty in being consistent. Now, Gary Namwell was a tenth of the player Robert Morrison was. One had a 15-year career and one didn't. Gary Neville had a 15-year career despite being a mediocre player because he could be consistent, because he had a support network around him that nurtured him, that gave him self worth, and the belief that he belonged. Kids out of poverty, Abraham, once they get to a certain level and they're out of their comfort zone, they have low self esteem. Even if they're exceptional at what they do, that depression starts to hit. And if they don't love what they do, you can still be exceptional at it. Because, to be good at a particular skill is essentially, how much time you dedicate to that particular skill. And but if you don't love it, then you get players that are taking drugs. You get people that are 45 years old, have big plaques on the wall, top anesthesia, everything, but they're miserable because they're doing or something, a profession that allowed mum and dad to brag at cocktail parties. Never was anything about them. So if you want nurturing, you can build a Ferrari, great wheels, great aerodynamics, great engine, but if the driver's inebriated and hit the wall, don't matter. And what's in here is the driver. So if you aren't nurturing a child, right, if you aren't giving them the confidence to correct mistakes, not berate them as if they did something wrong. There's just this really toxic concept that punishment, retribution produces results. People that smack a shit out of their kids. By the way, does your boss get to smack a shit out of you when you do something wrong? No, of course not. Because you don't believe it works when it comes to you, but you believe inflicting that on someone else. This is not how we learn. People confuse fear with respect. If someone is fearful of you and obedient of you, that's not respect. If someone behaves a certain way without fear of retribution, that's respect. Right? But respect is earned. Fear, when you have a child, they're obedient. When they stop becoming obedient through fear of threat, that's whenever a lot of people have problems with kids. So that's when they're rude. That's whenever they're problematic. That's whenever they've no respect. No, they never had respect for you. They feared you, but now they're big enough to smack you back. You're seeing the difference between fear and respect. This is a big problem. And we now micromanage our kids' lives to such a degree that we don't get, we get the same player over and over and over again. Because that's what you should expect in a system that doesn't select for who can play, it selects for who can pay. Now, we don't have that as much over there, but we have it here. And when your first principle is who can pay, not who can play, shit in, shit out.
But I think it goes beyond development of youth, because I look at myself as a 20-year-old and I look at my now son as a 20-year-old, and his generation versus mine,
Do you have a memory like a police informant? Go ahead.
and it's entirely different. Like,
Of course,
I
no.
I remember my son was at my 21st, and I try to rekindle memories from my generation to the current generation, and technology has transformed everything. So when you speak about the psychological importance in youth and the toxicity that's involved with a negative environment, I think that extends far beyond what myself and yourself had to endure, because it was almost like when we hit our early teens, we were expected to be approaching life as if we were 17 or 18 years of age. Whereas now, I think there's an awful lot of mollycoddling that's required for late teens, early 20s. And that's when you draw back on something that we spoke about last week, where it's so important to have good classes of circles around you, to have people advising you and not telling you what you want to hear all the time. So I think it's probably important to deviate back to the game here ever so slightly and to look at one player in particular that started this conversation about the youth, and
Well,
that
I
was
just want
Benjamin
to finish that
Sesko.
point, Sean. Sorry, when you're done, I just want to add one little caveat to that. Go ahead, man.
Go
Sorry.
for it. Go for it. Go for it.
I don't like this narrative that kids are our younger generations mollycoddled. Look, every generation says that about the one before, every single one, or one after them, right? If you look at what these kids are dealing with, the human brain was not designed to be able to tolerate this crescendo of abuse. We all know how insecure we are growing up. We're all trying to find ourselves, compare yourselves with your social group, how attractive you are, your clothes, your status, and that's really hard. Really, really hard. Now imagine doing that times a million. Imagine you're a young girl, you're on Instagram, and you need to have bigger butt, bigger boobs, bigger lips, BB, all this shit. How does a young female have positive self-esteem?
But
And
this is the point I was. This is the exact point I'm making, though, Phil.
it's
I'm
just as
you,
much
you,
for that. So I don't like. I don't think they're mollycoddle. I think these kids are getting. This is the first generation that will be worse off than their parents in terms of standard of living. These kids got their life destroyed.
yes, and I mean, obviously, both of us have got one.
Yeah.
We understand what they're going through. But that doesn't mean that there's not an orifice that is mollycoddling there because of the constraints that they have in modern society and
Mm,
technology playing the role that it plays. This is
yes.
something that I have
Mhm.
published so many times about the importance to recognize the difficulties with modern footballers and modern coaches,
Yeah.
modern managers, because they are enduring something that previous generations never did.
Fragment. Yes. That's yeah. Yeah. 100%.
Like, it was something I spoke about, several weeks ago, maybe with you or maybe with somebody else. Referencing Gary Neville, Paul Scholes, Nicky Butt, and these
Yes.
guys being so
Perfect.
flippant with what they say in public, yet they never encountered a morsel of it when they were players, and they think it's okay now to turn around and say, "You're playing for Manchester United. This is what you should be,"
Bang on it. Bang
and it's incorrect because they don't have the foggiest idea of what it is. That said, even though this generation is encountering a different class of problem than we had, just as we encountered something different to the generation before us, there is still a certain naivety. And I think it gets diluted generation upon generation. And this is why we discussed Jadon Sancho last week and as an example, because if you get a bad entourage around you who are
on.
not giving you
100%. Yes.
correct advice, everything falls asunder. So that's why when I look at somebody like Benjamin Sesko at 22 years of age, encountering all of this and having to move from being a
Great
superstar
point. Yep. Yep.
to come into England and to endure immediate look, I could give you numerous examples. Take the one example that I'll use right now is Tim Sherwood's analysis of Benjamin Sesko when he scored the 2 goals against Burnley. He's had arguably his best performance in a Manchester United shirt, yet somebody who's paid to give their opinion on one of the most highly publicized platforms in the country says this fella is not good enough to wear the shirt. Now,
Well,
obviously, he has responded in the best possible way by just scoring important goal after important goal after important goal. Like, he's hit 6 goals in his last 7 Premier League appearances. And that is how ultimately you respond to this. But we've seen so many players crumble throughout the years because
yes.
they haven't been able to live with the pressure and they haven't been able to withstand the cauldron that is Old Trafford. And because of that, I think I admire Benjamin Sesko more than I ever thought was possible in his first season at the football club.
It's something that we just can't scale. And even I mean, I've talked to players who play for United, and they talk about. Honestly, when I started talking to players that play for United, it made me embarrassed for my conduct and commentary over Harry Maguire. Right?
Mm.
Well, undoubtedly, I was saying stuff for clicks and retweets. You know, not always, but I'm guilty of doing that. That I knew would be people would find funny and stuff without any consideration about the accumulative impact on that human being. Because I think I'm just one guy and I ain't gonna see it. But that's not true. And then you're confronted with that when you meet these individuals and the shame and embarrassment,
Yeah.
right? When you're and you realize you're just being classless. And then you start to imagine what if this was being done to my kid? Because the Aussies are footballer, and I get a perfect example of this with my commentary on Marcus Rashford. To everyone else, to people that don't know that family, he's just a monolithic footballer and an avatar. When you get to know a human being personally, you bond with other people. Your emotions become involved, complexity. You start to care about certain things, and you see it in a different way. I'm not asking anyone else to share that view. This is just from my own perspective, and you realize the cash value, the impact on a human being, and what that does to them. There is no paycheck you can get that's going to emancipate you from that. I personally couldn't be that consistent in life. If I had a camera on me 365 days a year, Sean, that would amplify certain things that I am not perfect in my life that would embarrass me. Bad days, you know, drinking instead of going, oh, I don't drink that much anymore. But like, you get what I'm saying? Just doing things that would be judged very harshly in the public eye. It's not out of malevolence or deceit. It's just because people are human and you environmental pressures around you that affect you in different ways. And I just think we are so inconsiderate of that. And I don't know what the right answer is to that because you're correct in saying that the rewards and the riches are far greater today than they ever were. But the dehumanization is too. And I don't know, man. It's a really hard thing to get right, and I think that social media has completely destroyed our social cohesion. This is a really interesting time in human history we're going through about the consequences of this. I mean, you look at the madness that's on our social media every day, and it's like I don't know the consequences of this. The all of this. I mean, I don't know. It's
I'm speaking my
I
age.
try to look at it from another human's perspective and not judge harshly because I'm not perfect either.
No, but it's actually something that we're speaking about this now. I had a brief conversation with my wife this morning about this. And you know that famous thing with social media we'd see on Facebook. You just go on, you start scrolling, and you'd see somebody checking into the local hospital or something like that.
Mm,
Naturally, then they're getting inundated with messages. What's wrong? Oh, DM
no,
me, hun, because it's for this social attention, and it's what you see so frequently from cohorts of it. But
mm,
look, Manchester United is always going to be, it's the easiest magnet for attention. And I have lost track of the amount that I have spoken about, the amount that I have written about how the toxicity surrounding this football club just consumes
yeah,
so many quality footballers. Because I'll always come back to the same thing. I probably say it to you maybe every week we speak. If you're playing for Manchester United, you have something about you. It's
mm,
just being able to have the mental fortitude and the strength to be able to block out all the noise. And we see it with certain players. And, you know, then it comes down to the wider conversation about the man that's leading them. And it's actually something that I saw you had tweeted several weeks ago. And I thought it was perfectly accurate. There's so much attention being spent on Michael Carrick now, coming into the summer, and who Manchester United need to bring in as the ideal coach to lead them on this journey. You got Julian Nagelsmann, you got Luis Enrique, and people are speaking about the necessity for a world class coach to come in. At Manchester United, I think it's more than that, Phil. You know, because these footballers are quality footballers, and I think a lot of the time they just need an individual who's strong enough to be able to put an arm around their shoulder and to
yeah,
guide them when it is like you know, you're not asking these fellas to reinvent the wheel. We've seen the ramifications of what occurs when somebody comes in and asks them to reinvent the wheel by playing them out of position and putting square pegs in round holes. We
yeah.
need an individual at the football club who's able to put an arm around his shoulder and to be able to say, you know, you're good enough. Just go out there and do it. And just to help them to block out the noise. And we're seeing that in droves with Michael Carrick. I know he's had less than a dozen games, but this is exactly what we want to see as supporters, is it not?
You know, a lot of football games, maybe 90% of them, are decided by who makes the most mistakes. And when you want to, you can't eliminate mistakes completely, but you want to eliminate the frequency and probability of happening. You keep it simple for players, right? Once you start complicating it, you increase the probability that players are going to make individual errors. This is what Michael Carrick has done. If you think about this, Sean, right, it's a miracle that you can get a dressing room of 22 human beings with complete consensus working towards the same goal. Well, I find that hard to accomplish with myself, where I'm not in conflict with myself during the day. You have completely aligned goals. It's really hard to do that. And if you can produce something that's simple, I think as Mourinho was saying this, You're not going to teach Ronaldo how to be a better footballer in training. Coaching does that at youth level. At this level, it's really hard to develop players because it's all about competition. And so it's about refining the process. It's about building familiarity and training. It's about working on set pieces and stuff like that. And minor detail alterations. So what you said about Carrick by putting the arm around someone, this is primarily what top management is. Brian Kidd was a better coach than Ferguson. He was a better manager, right? This level is about managing people. They have the skill set to go out and deliver. Keep it
Hmm.
simple, right? They're going to make fewer mistakes than the opposition. Them, all things being equal, the better players win the game. I just think that once you start complicating things, you are playing into the hands of the opposition because you don't need to do that. I think Carrick has kept it simple, let players come up with their own solutions, nurtured them, and even the players he's putting on the bench, they're coming in and winning games for him and they want to play for him. And I think that is the biggest obvious difference to me.
Absolutely. They look like they want to play for him. And the byproduct of all of this and the result today has lifted them into third place above Aston Villa on goal difference. I'm keeping one eye as I'm speaking with you. I'm looking at the game that's going on in London, and there's 2 minutes left as I'm speaking, and Arsenal are beating Chelsea 2-1. So if that stays the way it is, we are 6 points ahead of Chelsea, who are in sixth place, 3 points ahead of Liverpool. It's a
Chelsea
massive.
could have done us a favour in a title race today.
But you see, you're looking at a side now that's 11 games unbeaten, Phil, in the Premier League. And we have a real litmus test on Wednesday going to Newcastle because regardless of the form that they have, they always show up for United. And trips that we make to that ground are generally not easy. But there's something very, very special building here. And, you've mentioned the bench a couple of times. It's not only just a strong starting 11, but there's options coming off the bench. Like today, because of the decision to put Benjamin Sesko starting, you've got Ahmad coming off the bench for the final quarter. He's bringing on Aiden Heaven and Joshua Zirkzee. And I will say Joshua Zirkzee actually gave a very impressive cameo at the end. It deserves to be said because plenty of people choose to down him. And even though it does look like his future may lie elsewhere after the summer, for him to still have the wherewithal about him to come on and actually deliver a display like that, I thought it was commendable for him. But ahead of this, if everything stays the way it is right now, which it looks like it's going to be, we're after building a 6 point lead on Chelsea here, and Champions League football, even though there's 10 games to go, anything can happen. It looks surer now than it has for a very, very long time.
Yeah, I think it helps when you're actually not being taken off at half time against the team down 10-minute, where
Mm.
you're being taken out of games so that you don't affect them rather than being put in them. I was searching on Grokka. What was the Premier League table on January 13th when Michael Carrick took over? And United were sitting seventh on 36 points. I think 36, 32 points. Newcastle, Brentford, Liverpool, Villa, all ahead of them. Chelsea right on their tail. The contrast
Oh, yeah.
between where we were and where we are, I mean, it's a wonderful position to be in, to where we used to do this under Fergie, where, yeah, I know we won, but let's dissect the bad performance. Let's do that every week. If we want to win games of football, and we're able to just find fault with the performance, not the result, what would we have given? If you'd have said to Carrick when he first came in, your target is to catch Aston Villa, to be in third by March 1st, and to not lose a game the next seven, win six of them, you're completely insane.
I know.
That is not a reasonable. I mean, no one in possession of their faculties would even dare utter that. That's what happened. We're going into Newcastle, and Newcastle are a decent team. Everton beat them the week yesterday. They're very beatable. They'll raise the game against United, but for me, we're going into a Newcastle game with a. I don't think the performance today is as much as a worry as what a lot of people seem to think. Or, I unbelievably have people question Michael Carrick, and I can't understand that to me. Like, what do you think Manchester United are? Do you think that they're a team that are capable of being consistent to the point every week to where they're not under threat in games, to where this is Premier League football, this is professional football. This is what United looked like at their peak. I remember losing away to Everton. You know, there's just no day you're going to wake up when Manchester United are so good that they don't have bad games.
I think what it is though, Phil. I think there's a lot of scar tissue. There's
Yeah,
scar
of course.
tissue that is reminiscent over the last decade or more, and one of the biggest scars is this bizarre ability to go out and play against the bigger sides, and then struggle against the would be lesser sides. That's occurred season on season on season, and I think what people need to realize here, and this is something I stress quite a lot. Manchester United are going to lose football games under Michael Carrick. They're going to lose football games under Michael Carrick this season. If they don't, I, I mean, they just give him the job for as long as he wants. But they're going to lose football games under Michael Carrick, and people need to realize that when that happens, it's not the end of the world. It's just a natural course of football. It's it's an anomaly. You referenced something at the very start of this podcast about how no teams are beating other teams by significant scores, and even though Wolves are statistically one of the worst teams, they're not because of the basis of competition that you're dealing with. This is a very competitive division, and Manchester United have had to deal with such irregular turmoil at that football club that to be able to turn it around right now, like there was a gentleman, I don't know what his name is, and I don't know what his problem was, but he started attacking me on social media before 11 o'clock this morning.
I
He
would
was
make fun
very,
of
very unhappy with me, and
it.
he was making all sorts of
That's the
ludicrous
waste runner
claims.
account.
You you were fast asleep in your cot at that stage. But look, the onus that I was told from day one when Carrick came in there, the reason that Carrick stood out over Ole was there was no initial press forward with him that I want this job and I want to put myself in a position where I'm in consideration for this job. It was, I want to come in, I want to positively impact this football team, and I want to do everything that I can to get as many places up the table as possible. The goal that was set out to him was we need a return to European football, obviously, for the financial incentive that comes with that. If we can get Champions League, that would be the ideal. He's delivering that and then some. And even though Newcastle will be a difficult game on Wednesday, we have every opportunity to go there and take points off them. You said you asked Grok about the football table. I saw something either this morning or yesterday that was revisiting Opta's predicted table. I think when Carrick took over, or a couple of weeks before Carrick took over, and United had finished the season, I think, in ninth place with 47 or 48 points. It's just night and day, Phil.
It's really this is bizarre to me. So there's a couple of moments where I look back and go, the world has been totally insane since Kobe Bryant died, right? COVID, everything, just nothing makes sense. And I'm going. One of the questions I don't think I'd ever get a proper answer to is how someone like Onana survived 2 seasons as a Man United goalkeeper. Every time I see compilations of his errors, that there should have been a consequence at Manchester United after about 2 or 3 games where that was not allowed. Like then I'm looking at Ruben Amorim going, I don't understand this.
Phil, I'm going to cut you. I'm going to cut you. It is the 95th minute, and I believe Chelsea have just scored.
What is it, 2 each in?
I believe it is two each. And if that is the case, I have to say this. If that is the case, Arsenal will drop down to 62 points. We'll have a game in hand. We'll only be, what do we be behind them?
11.
A win takes us
No, but
to eight. A win would take us to 8 points within them. Although I'm after cutting you off, I think.
So Arsenal threw another lead away in the last minute of the game.
Well, no, I'm not entirely sure what's happening here now.
Oh, mate, come on, that's fake news.
I'm not entirely sure what's happening. I had the score going on the side, and it said they were after scoring, but it hasn't updated. So it looks like I'm after cutting you off a little bit too jumpy there, I'm afraid.
Well, it's all right. Now, probably a good idea anyway. They cut me off. But what was I talking about actually? But Ruben Amorim. I look at Ruben Amorim and going, I don't even understand what happened here. I, this is one of the most bizarre periods in United's contemporary history where you're going, what happened here? When Ruben Amorim was hired, he was one of the most progressive young coaches in the game. Lots of people were showing
Mm.
tremendous interest in him, and it was such a colossal failure that it's hard to believe that it was this bad. I look at your league table last season and in disbelief, going out against Grimsby, going out and going, I don't even understand how to appraise what happened because so many things happened that are just, that are just so unique that have no historical precedent. And you're going, I don't even understand how to summarize why he failed, what went wrong, because there's just nothing that I can compare it to. And this is why I said it's hard to know how bad United are and how good they are, because you can't take anything that happened under Amorim as an accurate reflection of United's levels. Just the contrast of what we're seeing now is just so different. And you go, what possibly could Amorim have been doing that would have meant that United couldn't keep a clean sheet? He couldn't. Once they won 3 games in a row, where they lose against Spurs in the final, where they go out against Grim. Like, there's just so many failure points there. I'm going. I just don't understand how that happened. Um, and so we're at the other side of it. United want to have to flatten the curve between good performances and bad performances. If City or Arsenal would lose a game, they're not going to lose 5 or 6. They're not going to go out and get battered. So you can lose a game, but the performance curve has to be like it's great. There has to be a small differential between the worst and the best. That's what consistency looks like.
Yeah.
Can't be, we talk about the playing better against big teams. That's because big teams come at you and they give you the space and behind. It's really hard to break down a professional football team that put 10 men behind the ball that are organized, and it's really hard to do. I mean, Real Madrid would find that hard, but they it just the way United are shaped today, it just looks like instead of rowing, they're sailing.
You know what the ultimate irony is in all of this, don't you? That we're after putting together a best in class sporting department that made a decision to bring in Ruben Amorim, and they may have accidentally stumbled across the perfect solution to this football club. And that is the definition of Manchester United modern day, my friend. That with all of the power heads in the boardroom and all of these sporting whizzes putting together the ultimate platform for success to achieve Project 150, they accidentally stumble across what could be the best coach and the best option for this football team to actually achieve it.
Sometimes you stumble across solutions that have been staring in your face the whole time. My ex had a problem with snoring, and I got her a guillotine and told her I found a cure. Sometimes the solution's staring you right in the face, but what it does tell you is a lot of this is luck. Yes, some of it is down to obviously expertise and predicting second and third order effects of your decisions, but sometimes it's just an alignment of luck. Mo Salah signed for Liverpool. Klopp wanted Julian Brown, right? Eric Cantona was a serendipitous phone call. Bill Leslie was calling Leeds, was calling to try to sign Dennis Irwin.
Hmm.
It wasn't the result of, forensic scouting. It was, I mean, you think about that now, that went wrong. Fergie would have got. So you just decided to pick a player randomly off the top of your head and go sign him that you hadn't really done any homework on? Not that type of gamble, if it goes right, is transformative for the football club. If it goes wrong, I mean, that could have cost for he had to win the league. The year before, they threw away that lead against Leeds. You need a bit of luck. And, you know, penicillin was an accidental discovery. This is what we do. And sometimes you find a way, you get a bit of fortune, and you don't break it to fix it again.
Yeah, and long may that continue. That game has in fact finished 2-1 to Arsenal as best as I can see. So whatever that live score decided to do to me and put me off, I can only apologize for that. But we travel there on Wednesday. Every opportunity of increasing the feel good factor at Manchester United, and every passing game that goes, Phil, is another notch and another point, and hopefully another 3 points in Michael Carrick's belt, which is only furthering his claim to stay on here for the foreseeable future. And look, there's better things we could be. I mean, how often we're discussing defeats and disappointment. He's brought the feel good factor to the players, to the fans, and long may it continue, my friend.
Think about it if you're Newcastle, right? If I'm a
Hmm.
Newcastle fan, do I feel confident going into this game against United? I
God, no.
wouldn't. Not many people want to play United right now. Everybody wanted to play United a month ago, 6 weeks ago. So, there's people waiting for Michael Carrick to lose a game to say, see, shouldn't get the job. Gary Neville, I think, is one of them. And I just think that we're in a position right now that was completely unthinkable. And people will use United's next defeat as evidence that Michael Carrick shouldn't get the job and ignore all the preponderance of evidence supporting another perspective that he should get the job. That body of work will be completely dismissed for a small body of work because people are looking for evidence to fit a view that's already preformed instead of letting the evidence lead you to the view. So I don't think United will lose this game on Wednesday, and I don't think it's a must-win either. I think if they go there and take a point, that's not bad. And after Palace today, I was thinking that's another game out of the way, another 3 points. And I'm sitting here pleased. I didn't feel bad after West Ham either, by the way.
No, and in many ways, I'm not wishing it upon the team or the manager in any way, but you'd almost be curious as well to see how the team could respond to adversity. That's a natural part for any head coach to be able to tinker and to be able to respond to adversity. It's one thing to do it in game and to be able to change any sort of tactical semblance or introduce a player to be able to change the fortunes in 90 minutes. But to see how he and the team can respond after a defeat or a setback, I mean, that's something that could ultimately galvanize him as a coach. And look, everybody is pressing Manchester United to keep this going. You go to Newcastle, you get a point, as you said. It's a good point. You go to Newcastle, you win. Well, it's just another win, and it's just another day at the office for the man.
I think in this next couple of games, we got Palace, we got Newcastle, Villa, Chelsea, right? This is how many games is left? 10. We'll
10
find
games
out
left.
the next three where United are going to finish. If United committed those three unscathed, and Villa are there for the taking. I mean, I thought United were in a fight for fourth and fifth. The fact that they're only in third is unbelievable. Villa are there for the taking, and Chelsea doesn't fill me with dread. Um, never do well there, but rarely do. But I'm confident, and they're facing a Manchester United that they haven't faced since Ten Hag's first season, really, where United had momentum, and you could say that this team is better than that because they have characters in this team that do know how to respond to adversity and know how to see out a game, have the dark arts. There's a certain type of camaraderie built in that team spirit. And I'm just starting to trust a bit that if that game's under Amarine today, I'm touching cloth the last 10 minutes because you're just expecting a self fulfilling prophecy if you need to drop in a clanger like Arsenal typically do. Instead, I was confident they would see it out. And all the games recently have been tight at the end. And even the Everton game, the way they handled that pressure from set pieces, it's been a while since United have had a glass jaw. It's been a while since I've trusted the ability to take a punch.
And that's a pretty fitting way, I think, to finish up today, Phil.
I think
As
so.
always, my man, absolutely superb speaking with you. Again,
Yes,
fantastic speaking with you off the back of 3 points, climbing into third place. I'd like to just pay a special mention to everybody who's taken the time to send kind messages through to us, given such positive feedback. We were expecting to have some sort of negative feedback at this stage, and I'm not welcoming that, but we haven't got a whole pile of it so far. So thank you
all
very
right.
much for all of the kind messages, all the positive feedback. And if you want any of your questions answered at any time, just feel free to send them to myself or Phil, and we will happily speak about them. We honestly, we welcome every one of them.
I think someone fat shamed me the other day, by the way, bastards. Did it behind an arm's account, so I was getting chubby.
All right. Well, look, great evening,
Oh,
man.
dude. All right, mate. Yes, thanks to all of you for downloading the podcast, for getting back to us, for being in touch. We will start doing these live relatively soon. So look out for that. Keep your questions coming. We'll start making sure we integrate them into segments on the show. Obviously, this is a reaction show to what happened in the past game. We'll be back later on in the week. Get us some questions in. Myself and Shaun, we'll get to them. And again, thank you to all of you. Don't forget, follow my colleague here at Theatre of Red at Shaun Connolly. They are not Sean Connery, Sean Connolly. It's all included. You'll see it, the links and all that there. And has lots of other exceptional content outside of this. It's well worth your perusal. Go ahead, subscribe to platforms. That's the best way you can support both of us, folks. Is subscribe to our platforms. And we are extremely grateful if you give us your time, your ear through the week. And it is something that we honestly, it still baffles me that there's human beings over the world that listen to these podcasts, my podcast, and wherever you listen to. I'm with you spiritually in every other way. Some of the feedback I get of people from random parts of the world about listening to this is honestly one of the most flattering things I've ever heard. It just means so much to me, and I know it does to you too, Shaun. So wherever you're listening to this, I hope your mental health as well, your physical health as well, and we thank you sincerely for supporting us.
Here, here. Take care, folks.
All right, mate. Bye, guys.